Denver Broncos linebacker Dre Greenlaw has had a big impact in a small sample size so far since he's returned from injury. We'll highlight his impact and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into Locked On Broncos, your daily Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We know it's your team every day. Thanks to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen. However you choose to do so, I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work over there at milehighsports.com. I cover the team daily in Dove Valley as well as here on the podcast. We got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show. A little bit of a mailbag as we take some of the best questions sent in from members of Broncos Country, and we answer them, including what type of impact Dre Greenlaw has had on the defense so far, despite his limited sample size early on after Sunday's game against the Houston Texans. On top of that, we'll also discuss Bo Nix's mindset and where it's at right now and why that has such an underrated aspect in terms of the Broncos' success in some of these close one-score games this season. And will the Broncos here at the NFL trade deadline make any moves? We'll discuss all of that here on today's episode of the show, brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 to use all throughout the entire app in bonus bets. A lot to break down here. Broncos Country, we opened up our handy-dandy mailbag. We just got a letter, and obviously an avid listener in Broncos Country asked the question here, and I think this is important to talk about because since he's been in the lineup, we've seen him in 2 games so far since he's had the quad injury. Dre Greenlaw has had a big impact in a small sample size, and as the Broncos are working through starting to ramp up his pitch count a little bit, it's exciting to see maybe what he can be, and certainly I think we're all excited for Dre Greenlaw and Pat Surtain to be on the same exact field at the same time at some point this season here. But we get a mailbag question that asks, what have you seen from Dre Greenlaw in his small sample size on the field? Let's go back to one of the more important moments of Sunday's game against the Houston Texans. It is when the Texans get down to the 2-yard line and their first play. One thing they try to do is they hand it off to Nick Chubb. You see Dre Greenlaw shoot through because he's also playing in the end zone at about 2-3 yards depth inside the end zone. He shoots forward and he just shoots through the gap. He and Talanoa Hufanga, they make the stop on Nick Chubb on that very first play in one of the Broncos' goal line stands. And then on the very second play, they go to hand it off to Woody Marks, and Dre Greenlaw just sticks him. I mean, that right there was big. We talk about impact. We already knew the Broncos' defense was very good in the red zone, right? Can't state enough. And I did a film breakdown on it over at milehighsports.com if you want to go check it out. Dre's play right there, just the tone that he kind of set there from that first stick there, especially following it up with another hit on Marks on second down, made third down easier. And then you force the Texans to obviously have a penalty. It backs them up, and then ultimately they settle for a field goal. I just think that Dre, he plays with such fire and intensity, and I've loved what I've seen on the tape from him so far. He played 27 snaps of defense in Sunday's game against the Texans, and it wasn't just like every series. You know, the Broncos, one series he'd be on the field, one series he'd be off, but it almost like in a close game, my worry during Sunday's game was that if the Broncos are in a close game in the fourth quarter, is Dre going to reach a certain amount of snaps to where they're like, hey, you've reached your limit for the week. We got to pull you out. I don't think that would have sat well with Dre in that situation. So it was nice to see in the fourth quarter on Denver's final defensive drive, certain situations, passing down situations, Dre is in at linebacker. I'm loving it, and I can't wait to see even more of him. This guy just sets the tone. Plays with his hair on fire. 27 snaps, 8 tackles in 27 snaps, 1 quarterback hit, and also a sack that he registered, obviously, in Sunday's win here for the Broncos. I think it's important here, and it's something that I also wanted to ask Sean Payton during his Monday Zoom conference call. I asked him about what he's seen from Dre so far in the limited amount of snaps that Dre has certainly played, and as that continues to uptick and increase, here's what Sean Payton told me.
Yeah, he brings an element, just a toughness, a competitiveness. It's hard to put on paper. He's extremely physical, and I think he plays with such good pad level and leverage. He's a great tackler, so it's it's good to have him in the lineup. It was tough waiting and making that decision, but hindsight, it was worth it.
Sean Payton is basically saying, we wanted Dre Greenlaw early on in the season. That was that hope early on, week 3, week 4. They were hoping to get him. They ended up putting him on IR, and then he has to obviously miss some time here. But basically, Sean is saying Dre Greenlaw was worth the wait. And I feel like he has been. If you watch him on the tape, it's fun. I can't wait to see him get more snaps. I think he's a game changer here for the Broncos defense. And certainly I'm curious to see what Broncos country has to think about that. You see just the level of impact when he's on the field, just how fast he is, instinctual he is. And when Sean Payton was talking about leverage and low pad level in that goal line, you see it. Dre Greenlaw is the lowest man in that situation. If you ever played, you're always coached and taught defensively, lowest man wins. Not only does he get a low center of gravity, but, man, he brings some just absolute intensity with him. He brings nothing but physical force, and he's able to shoot, make contact, drive his feet, and obviously get the stop here to help the Broncos hold off in the red zone, maintaining their stance. He's the NFL's best red zone defense. Dre Greenlaw is a difference maker, and he will be throughout the entire season here. I'm excited to see him get even more reps, and I'm curious this week, too. I think it's a valid question because the Broncos played on Sunday. Now they play on Thursday. You have the short days where obviously the Broncos are back on the practice field here today. Normally, if they're not playing on Thursday night, they'd be off today and they'd be returning to practice on Wednesday. They're going to have walkthrough practices here today on Tuesday and obviously on Wednesday before Thursday's game. They're not going to throw the pads on and do a lot of contact this week, not before Thursday night football. So does Dre's snap count increase? Does it change? Do they pull back a little bit? I'm curious to see what that's going to be like here for the Broncos going forward this week as they prepare for the Raiders here. Some other things that we also got to talk about as well. Somebody asked me, because this was obviously a topic of discussion yesterday's episode of the show, we sat down and we reacted to what Sean Payton said initially after Sunday's game about special teams. And if they can't clean it up, they'll find someone who will clean it up. There's a lot of speculation, myself included, about that being about Darren Rizzi. Maybe it is, but Sean Payton, we caught up with him on the conference call on Monday, and the thing that he told us was that's not coaching. He says coaching has been outstanding. I disagree with that on special teams. I don't think it has been outstanding. I think it's been very problematic here for this team, but he said it was more so related to personnel, and that if you're supposed to be in on a unit and you're sitting on the bench, he's got a problem with that. Certainly, I think that is a valid thing here for Sean to say, but our interpretation was, okay, that also has to do with coaching too, because every time before you're about to be on a unit, you have to have awareness that all your guys are out there. And look, it's also on the player that is supposed to be in there that obviously didn't come in there. Darren Rizzi's unit has to play better. So what did I think of those comments? I think that obviously Sean, maybe, like I said, maybe he feels that way about coaching, but that's a conversation he's going to have behind closed doors with Darren. He's not going to have that conversation openly with us in the media, but I think it is a valid discussion point worth talking about here as the team moves forward. They've got to be better on that unit, communication issues from the coaching staff or not, amongst personnel, when especially with the Marvin Mims thing a couple weeks ago. That right there is also on coaching. It's not just on the players. There's an onus on both sides there. I think both, that can be accurate and valid when we talk about critiquing what's going on. So to me, Payton's comments came off strongly after the game. He said it had nothing to do with the coaching on the Monday conference call. And as we all know in this game, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Broncos country, make sure you let us know your thoughts here on Dre Greenlaw. Also curious for your thoughts on the Broncos special teams unit and Sean Payton's comments initially after he had said it was on personnel. Let us know your thoughts here on today's episode of the show. But coming up next, we're going to open up a mailbag question where Broncos country asks about Bo Nix and his mindset and why it's different from other quarterbacks that we have seen here in the Mile High City in the last handful of years. We'll debate and discuss that and more here on today's episode of the show. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at BILT. And nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well be getting something for it. And that is where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can actually use, whether you're going on a trip out of country, you're going to another state, you're going to restaurants, gyms, hotels, you name it. You can use a handful of different rewards courtesy of BILT by just paying your rent. Because when you pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, and even a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT, it isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. The one thing I like, my wife and I, we pay our rent every single month on BILT, and she loves to travel. So we rack up the points, and we usually take it and spend it towards the end of the year on a trip where it's just her and I. We escape to somewhere for vacation. We can buy our airline tickets there or purchase our hotel stay because of the rewards we accumulate through the BILT app. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure to use the link so that they know that we sent you. The Broncos are finding ways to win gutsy games in late clutch time situations. And this team that we see here from the Broncos in 2025, there is a drastic difference from the unit that we saw last year, where they found themselves in a handful of one-score games. They lost those games in 2024 in Bo Nix's rookie season. But now, Bo Nix and the offense, they are finding ways to win these games late here in 2025. And Bo's mindset has a lot to do with that. We'll break that all down here on today's show. I want to say thank you to everyone in Broncos country. Once again, make sure you stay tuned. Later on today, you're going to get the debut of the Broncos squad show. Myself, Nick Ferguson, and Neil Opiro. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about the Broncos. It goes live for an hour here on the Locked On Broncos podcast feed. And you also get us post games as well following every Broncos game. So a lot of fun conversation coming your way here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you hit that subscribe, that follow button if you haven't done so already, so you never miss out. Our next Broncos mailbag question, somebody asked me, I think it's a very valid one here, because this is something I've noticed, and a handful of fans, I think, have pointed this out at various points on social media. We received the question, what do you think of the way that Bo Nix carries himself? And sometimes when you get a question like that, it can be loaded one way or the other, because there's times where he's not afraid to test back against Sean Payton. I love that about him. But they go on to say it never seems like he lets negative plays impact him from being able to bounce back and settle in. That, to me, I think is a very valid question here. So in the way that I think that Bo Nix carries himself, being around Bo and seeing him at practice, being around him all throughout the summer at training camp, and just seeing him go through the ups and downs of, the summer days, our regular season schedule kind of changes with him, but then we get to talk with him at the podium, usually on the first practice day of the week. I just think that Bo's got a mindset where he's still learning and growing. And I think that there's so much going on. I mean, obviously the pressure of the quarterback position has a lot of different things that you have to deal with, a lot of stresses that naturally come with that territory. And being considered in that conversation as a franchise quarterback certainly creates external pressure there. But I don't think that Bo really feels this external or internal sense of pressure to go out there and to perform, which I think is good, because sometimes in the sports psychology world, I have a master's degree in this, I think it's important to highlight here. Sometimes we let those things, we let the element and the responsibilities of our job amplify some of the bigger things. And that can also lead to negative play. That can lead to negative mindset, so to speak. So in terms of the way he carries himself and not letting the negative plays, because look, yes, Bo this season, and I think we have to have a very valid conversation here, Broncos country. Anytime we have criticism of Bo Nix, or we talk about where he struggled or the things that he isn't doing well, that's not necessarily us being negative. It's valid criticism. I'm not coming out here and saying the Broncos need to move on from Bo Nix. They need to put in Jarrett Stidham. Like half of the people in the comment section sometimes put that out there. It's fair to critique where he's struggling, but we also praise what he's doing well. It's not just like, all right, hey, Bo, you're doing all this wrong. We talk about things that are going wrong with Bo, and we also talk about in that same conversation what he's doing well. That is being objectively fair. So apparently we've come across too negative. I don't agree with that. I think it's crazy. We have to be able to have these logical and objective conversations about QB play, and also understand it's not all entirely on Bo when he does struggle, but there are things he's responsible for here. I hate that I have to bring this up again, but my goodness, the backlash that sometimes we get from being able to talk about the offense and Bo, it's frustrating sometimes. Bo himself, I think, has a great mindset when you talk about his struggles. As a matter of fact, we got something from after Sunday's game where he talked about his mindset and how he kind of moves on from a play-to-play basis. He's like a cornerback in a sense where he has a short memory. If he makes a negative play, he's going to go back on and he's going to watch it on the tape, and he's going to say, okay, this is what I need to do to be better in this situation, whether it's, technique, whether it's pressure related, whether it's just he didn't see something. Like Bo was very introspective into his own game. He doesn't need me to say anything. He doesn't really need his coaches to, but though the coaches, that is their job. I will say this with Bo. He doesn't seem wavered. And so many young quarterbacks, especially in today's age of social media and all the noise, even media makes a lot of noise as well when it comes to QB play. They can put a lot of pressure on a guy. And we've seen it here in Denver with all the quarterbacks, with the ongoing carousel here in Denver, quarterback play leading to guys not playing well, going up and down performances. You got Paxton Lynch's, the Trevor Simeons, you go to the Joe Flacco's when he was here in 2019, a Case Keenum's, Drew Lock, you name it. Sometimes guys can't move on from a negative play. I don't get that here from Bo. I think that he does a really good job. If he has a bad play, I think he settles his nerves down. He goes and makes a play. I'll give you a great example on Sunday's game. He misses Evan Ingram wide open down the left sideline. On the very next play, he goes back to Cortland Sutton on that very next play for a touchdown. Early on, his interception that he threw in that game to the safety, he threw it high into the inside, which allowed the safety to go over and make a break. Well, on RJ Harvey's touchdown that he had on the wheel route there, Bo put it high and a little bit more in front versus it high and a little bit inside, and allowed RJ to obviously go out there and get it. Though Cortland Sutton ran a great route to draw the safety over and to not allow that guy to get over in time to make a play. Bo doesn't make a lot of the same mistakes twice. And I think that has a lot to do with his mindset. Here's what Bo Nix had to say after the game on Sunday about his mindset and his ability to shake off, a negative play and go out there to make the next one.
It's never feeling like you're out of the fight. I've learned a different kind of patience as I've grown. In high school, I was not very patient. It was like an every drive thing, and if I got off the field and we had to punt, it was like the end of the world. And in college, it was learning how to win certain battles and field position and, just getting completions and checking it down and moving to the next play. And, you just have to eventually learn as a quarterback how important that next play really is. And if you can just get it to it in a better situation than you were the play prior, then you did your job. And so I've just learned how to get to the next play better. I've learned a little bit more patience as I've gotten older and more mature and experienced in the game of football. And each level, I just feel like I've been able to learn a lot and grow a lot. And, I'm definitely not the same as I was this time last year, much less, when I was in high school. So I've come a long way, still got so much to learn, which is the fun part. But, I'm going to continue to work and not stop until I, maximize my potential. Don't know when that'll be, but I'm excited because there's a lot to learn, a lot to grow from. It gives us another opportunity next week to go out there and change it up, but I'm sure we'll learn from the mistakes we make next week as well. So I just learned how to be a little bit more patient and go into the next play.
Quarterback play is never designed to be perfect. I think the social media world has really ruined that to the extent that we see guys putting up, hey, shout out to Sam Darnold, it's Sunday Night Football. He put up a ridiculous stat line, but it's not always going to be like that. That's anomaly-based stuff. You just want to see efficiency, and there's going to be games where you're not efficient and you're struggling. In Sunday's game, Bo wasn't necessarily efficient consistently enough, but he made big plays when it mattered against the NFL's best defense in some of the major categories that we observe here in the NFL. That's the thing here is the conversation is like people act like good quarterbacks can't make mistakes. Good quarterbacks can't throw interceptions. I watched Patrick Mahomes on Sunday against the Bills loft a interception into double coverage on an absolute just air ball where he just chucked it up as high as he could. Like the wide receiver is going to make a play. He was just right to a defensive back there in double coverage. And it's just like, all right, good quarterbacks are going to make mistakes. It is the toughest position to play in sport because you have guys trying to pressure you and to bring you down, guys dropping back into windows, and it's all about timing. Are your receivers running the right routes? Is the timing of the receiver's route thrown off because they face press coverage? Is it zone? Is it man? You have so much to read and analyze here that we expect perfection. I think the development of Bo Nix is exactly where it needs to be. He's growing. We see it. There's clear, tangible growth. There's been moments this year where it looks like, all right, this isn't a good game from Bo, But then he goes and he makes some good plays to make up for some of the negative plays there. He mentioned that they're about being able to move on from a negative play and go to the next play to make sure that the next play is more efficient. That is the game of the quarterback position, and that has never changed. Just how we talk about QBs, how we analyze them has changed because of the social media instant gratification era that we are currently living in right now. I think Bo's got a tremendous mindset to him. That's why I think that he's capable of handling the pressure of being a franchise guy, of being the guy that can lead this team, because it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be pretty, but you just want to continue to see growth. You want to see evolution from him. And I think we've seen that from Bo this year. He has a bad game one week. Okay, he bounces back the next. That's what we're looking for here. It's just the consistency factor. And once again, I'll pinpoint it and I'll say this outright. Sean Payton as a head coach also has to do a better job of putting these guys in a position to succeed. He doesn't always do that, but there are times where he does. There's times where receivers are dropping passes and it makes Bo look bad. There's times where protection doesn't hold up. It is a team game here, but the position that has the most pressure in it is Bo Nix. And I think he's built to handle it. I think he does a tremendous job. I think his mindset is in the right place. And that's why the Broncos, I think his mindset and how he's able to flip the switch, even if he's played bad for 3 quarters, he knows how to turn it on in the 4th quarter. And that's why the Broncos are finding ways to win these games late when they absolutely need to. Broncos Country, make sure you share your thoughts here on today's show on Bo Nix's mindset and what we've seen from him developing this clutch factor. 7 game-winning drives so far through his 2 years in the National Football League. That's pretty impressive in and of itself here. And we're not done yet. We still have one more thing to talk about in today's episode of the show. Broncos Country, will the team make any moves ahead of the NFL trade deadline? We'll discuss why that's probably not going to be the case for the Broncos this year. You'll get that and more here on today's episode of the show. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And we know right now the NBA season is back. The NFL season is in full swing. And there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or if you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel, they have live bets on everything from who will score next to 4th quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. You can even bet on things as to who's going to score the first basket of the game and the method in which they do that, whether it's a dunk, a layup, a free throw, a three-point shot, all of that inside the FanDuel app. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. The NFL trade deadline is here on Tuesday, and will we see the Denver Broncos make any moves? That's our latest mailbag questions. We continue our show here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get straight into it here because this is a very important day across the league. We're not only monitoring the Broncos, but we are also monitoring what other teams, maybe even the Las Vegas Raiders, could be doing here today, just a couple of days away from the Broncos and Raiders playing on Thursday Night Football. Mailbag question comes in, and they ask the question, will the Broncos make any move here at the NFL trade deadline on Tuesday? From my vantage point, sitting where I'm at here, Monday late afternoon, I don't necessarily believe that the Broncos are going to make a move at the NFL trade deadline. Reason why. What position is it that they would necessarily go out there and trade for? They've been rumored to be in on the tight end market, which they've been analyzing and observing that. They did sign Mercedes Lewis, and not to say that just because they signed Mercedes Lewis, they shouldn't go out there and trade for a tight end. I'm not saying that. Nate Adkins is going to be back sooner rather than later because he was not placed on injured reserve. Adam Troutman is a very reliable blocker for them. I don't know if you saw on Bo Nix's 25-yard run to set up the game-winning field goal. He had a one-on-one against Will Anderson, and he did such a great job of anchoring down, getting low leverage there and winning that matchup. It's not easy to do against a guy like Anderson, who's very, very talented off the edge there in Houston. And then you got Evan Ingram, who's being used in a variety of different ways where his utilization one week, it's high, it's exciting. He's getting a ton of targets, or he's having different plays happen for him, like an end around, or he's special design plays. He's scoring touchdowns here and there. And then there's the weeks where it's quiet. He receives a couple of targets, but maybe it's a pass that's too high. I just don't know who Denver is going to go out there and trade for right now. I know we talked about some names like David Njoku from the Cleveland Browns, It doesn't seem like they're going to be looking at trading him right now. At least that's what the report was over the weekend coming out from ESPN's Adam Schefter. But that could always change, and so much of that depends on capital and what teams are willing to give up. The Broncos have plenty of capital in this year's NFL draft. They're going to have a lot of salary cap relief as well with the Russell Wilson deal finally being off the books. They'll be going into the 2026 free agency period with so much flexibility, and they can make some moves. They can re-sign some guys like John Franklin Myers. There's a lot that they can do here. I just don't know if they're going to trade for somebody right now, especially on the offensive side, whether that be a wide receiver, whether that be a tight end. To me, it just doesn't make sense for them right now, though I think you can make valid arguments. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't think that they will, because we have seen the issues where this Broncos offense at times, when the run is working, they go away from it, right? They get very pass happy at times. Is that's what something that's truly missing here from this offense? I mean, I understand that guys like Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin are continuing to develop. Hopefully you get Marvin Mims back this week. You've got Cortland Sutton. If anything, like those are your top 4 guys. So what does it mean if you're going to try to add somebody else into the mix who maybe doesn't even know this playbook yet? How big of a difference is that going to make right away for the Broncos? Whereas they can sit back and maybe analyze their approach for free agency. If any trade happens here, I think for the Broncos, as we've seen the last couple of years, that's going to come in the offseason. That's going to come during the NFL draft. It's going to become, right before the season even opens up here, where they're going to make some moves. And obviously you got free agency coming up. I just don't see them making a move here today. Initially, after Ben Powers went down with his injury and Matt Parrott was the backup, I think we all thought to ourselves, okay, maybe this puts the Broncos in a position to become buyers for the offensive line market here. I don't see that being the case as well, especially with how well Alex Palczewski has been playing. We know Ben Powers is set to return at some point in December, but could he be Wally pipped, especially with how Palczewski has been playing so far? I'm very curious to see Denver's approach. It just doesn't make sense. I just don't see, just knowing Sean and George and their approach, they're going to go out there and get a guy if it makes the team better and gives them something right away. That's one thing Sean Payton told us earlier on this week. They're not going to go out there and just trade for a guy because, they're in this window where they believe that they're contenders. They're not going to go out there and make a trade just to send a message that, hey, we believe we're here. Sean says, no, if we're going to trade, we're going to go out and get a guy because he can help us right away at a position we need it. I don't know if I see that position that they need necessarily right now, though. Like I said, I see the arguments for a receiver. I see the arguments for a tight end. I just don't think that's going to happen here. But let's maybe look at another perspective here as we sit here late Monday afternoon, sitting down, recording this show. I think one of the things to talk about is how does the NFL trade deadline potentially impact the Las Vegas Raiders? Certainly with where they're at 2-6, there are conversations about Jacoby Myers, who's obviously before the season requested a trade. They said they weren't going to trade him. Considering where they're at with their record, how does that impact this week? Could they become buyers at the NFL trade deadline? Could they try to acquire some big name players? And how does that impact Thursday night's matchup? I think that there's a chance that Jacoby Myers gets dealt here at the NFL trade deadline for the Raiders, and they're going to roll with Tyler Lockett and obviously Trey Tucker and Brock Bowers from that standpoint in terms of their top receivers. I don't think that Max Crosby will get traded, but you never know, even though the Vegas has come out and they have said that they called him over the bye week and they said that they've reaffirmed their commitment to keeping him part of it. He looked frustrated after they lost in overtime to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think if anything we're monitoring the trade deadline for is, okay, what do the Chiefs do? What do the Chargers do? And what do the Broncos do? I imagine the Chargers are going to try to maybe get some help on the offensive line, maybe help at running back. That's an area right now where they're kind of banged up and they're hurting, obviously, after week 9 of play here in the National Football League. So Denver probably going to sit on their hands a little bit, and that's not a bad thing, folks. You don't always want to be in on the NFL trade deadline just because it's the popular thing to do. If there's a move to be made that you feel like is going to move the needle for you, it's going to make you better, go out and make it. But if the Broncos don't do anything here on Tuesday, it's not the end of the world. The Broncos, they have a pretty good roster intact, and they would have to make some corresponding roster moves as well, because if you add a guy to the roster and if you're not doing a player-for-player swap, you have to release somebody so you can make room for that player to come onto the active roster. So a lot of moving pieces. It's a short week. Sean Payton and his staff are focused solely on preparing for the Raiders and having the team ready to go on a short week turnaround. That's another reason why I don't think that Denver's going to be doing too much here. But with that said, I appreciate you, Broncos Country. Thanks for rocking with us here. And make sure you tune in here on Tuesday as we're going to have the debut of the Broncos Squad Show. And Neil Opiro, who hosts the postcast, he, myself, and former Broncos safety Nick Ferguson, we're going to be sitting down and talk about some of the biggest storylines this week going into Thursday's game against the Raiders. You'll get that here on the Locked On Broncos podcast.